So we're going to call our meeting to order, and this is the Federal Way Land Use and Transportation meeting, LUTC. And tonight, Councilmember Tran has been excused as he's out of town. So we will begin our meeting right now, and the first order of business, I should say we have Councilmembers Kochmar, Councilmember Walsh, Councilmember Honda. So it's
Like the car.
Yeah, I like the car, and myself, Jack Dovey. So we
And I'm
will,
also here.
and Lydia, welcome.
All right.
Okay, I didn't see the screen because I haven't turned it on yet, I'm sorry. Okay, we'll go to the first bit of business, which is, we've called it to order, now it's public comment. Is there any public comment here? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to committee business. Is there any, and welcoming Councilmember McDaniel. Is there any committee business anybody like to bring up before we start? No, so we'll move to the first item, which is approval of the minutes,
I move approval of the minutes of the December 8th meeting.
and I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 2-0. We'll go to item B, which is the 2023-2025 commute trip reduction CTR agreement with the city of SeaTac, which is surprising, but let's go with it.
Good evening, Chair and Council members. We are here to discuss the commuter production agreement with the City of SeaTac. And the policy question is, should the council authorize the mayor to enter into an agreement with the City of SeaTac for providing commuter production services? City of SeaTac is one of the cities in the county that's experiencing great automobile and traffic congestion and is hence mandated by state law to implement CTR program. And the intent of this agreement is going to be to establish and allow the City of Federal Way to undertake tasks on behalf of City of SeaTac to implement plans relating to CTR requirements. And the contract helps fund staffing for the city's CTR program as well. Options before council are authorize the mayor to enter into an agreement with the City of SeaTac for commuter production services. And the second option is do not authorize the agreement and provide direction to staff. Mayor recommends forwarding option 1 to council for approval. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions? Councilmember McDaniel?
Yeah, I just have one quick question. So I read through this a little bit. So the city of SeaTac's hiring us, are we doing some kind of paperwork for them, or what was it? I didn't
We're
understand.
providing services and commuter production program based implementation services to the City of SeaTac, and they will be funding us for the services we provide.
All right, thank you.
Council President Kochmar?
So maybe you can explain what that looks like.
We will be helping the employers in the City of SeaTac to help and reduce the drive-alone commuting in their city and help reduce traffic congestion for like the whole of the state.
And how do you plan on doing that?
By providing employer-based programs, they can provide incentives on like say transit services, and some of them have like hybrid employment opportunities. And the other one would be like how we have City of Federal Way compressed week schedules, and that would reduce the number of commutes that is made by the employees.
Thank you.
So I know we've had lots of experiences with this over the years. Do you anticipate any impact to our staff by taking on this work and not being able to do what we normally do in City of Federal Way?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
So, Chair, can I jump in here? So this is a renewal of this contract. We've been doing this for the last 2 years. So prior to that, we were contracted with another agency to do this for all of the cities. They elected not to renew contracts countywide. So we receive, both us and SeaTac receive funding from WashDOT on an annual basis. We both get $50,000, which effectively is not enough to hire the staffing associated with this program for one city. However, that being said, the one set of staffing can effectively do it for 2 to 3 cities. So we, 2 years ago, actually more like 3 years ago at this point, we started the process 2 years ago, we implemented it. We went out and talked to the city of Kent, city of Tukwila, city of Auburn, city of SeaTac, a couple others. And ultimately, we decided at a staff level, the best way to pursue this was to bring it into our house and then contract with SeaTac to be able to have a fully staffed program. They agreed. We brought that recommendation to council. Council concurred with that recommendation. We can't contract this out to a third-party professional firm at the same rates. So it really came down to, were we going to staff this or was SeaTac going to staff it? And ultimately, the decision jointly between our council as well as SeaTac's council was we would be the ones to staff it. So it's not changing anything we're doing currently. It's no increase or decrease in workload. It's just renewing the interlocal agreement at this point.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Honda?
Thank you. Does the state of Washington encourage cities to have hybrid work schedules, like work from home if you possibly can, or do they not encourage that?
I mean, that is an option, and it depends on the jurisdiction and the employers to whether or not adopt hybrid option. It comes down to the employer, what kind of program they want to implement in their workplace and work sites.
So the state doesn't have one way or another, they just let the jurisdiction decide?
Yeah, they let the jurisdiction decide based, yeah,
Okay, thanks.
yeah, no problem.
No other questions. Do I see a motion?
I move to forward the proposed agreement to the January 16, 2024 consent agenda for approval.
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item C, Military Road South Preservation Project bid award.
Good evening, Chair Rovi, committee members, council members. My name is Jeff Han. I'm the civil engineer for the city of Federal Way, and I'm presenting the Military Road South Preservation Project to committee, bid award to committee. The policy question is, so the city council award the Military Road South Preservation Project to the lowest responsible bidder. Seven bids were received and opened on December 11, 2023 for the Military Road South Preservation Project. The lowest responsible bidder is CPM Development Corporation DBA Icon Materials with a total bid amount of $956,369. Here is the project map. It's on Military Road South between SOA 18 and South 320th Street. The estimated expenditure is $1,252,000, which includes in-house design, construction costs, construction contingency, and construction management and inspection.
Could you move the little part of the screen off of the numbers so this, everybody in the public, if they're on, can actually see? Thank you.
Yes. Aye. The available funding for Military Road South Preservation Project is $1,252,000 and funded by Puget Sound Regional Council and Fund 102. Construction is anticipated to start in spring 2024. The options presented to committees are: 1, award the Military Road South Preservation Project to Icon Materials, the lowest responsible bidder, in the amount of $956,369 and approve a 10% contingency of $95,637 for a maximum contract amount of $1,052,000. Authorize the mayor to execute the contract, and to reject all bids for the Military Road South Preservation Project and direct staff to rebid the project and return to committee for further action. The mayor recommend option 1, and staff is available for any questions you may have.
Councilmember Walsh?
Yeah, just a quick question. I'm all for this, but just one question. How long has it been since we had to do that last time? How long has the road lasted without having to be redone?
We have not overlaying military for this area since I know that I think we incorporate into City of Federal Way.
Okay.
We did some maintenance, which is pavement repair on military, but we never overlaying military road.
So it's lasted pretty well then, so,
It's been a long time. It's
Okay.
probably
Right.
30+ years.
okay, sounds good.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. Lydia, do you have a question?
No, I don't. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Do I have a motion?
Yeah, I move to forward option 1 to the January 16, 2024 consent agenda for approval.
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Aye, thank
And now we'll move on to item D, Military Road South, D, 21st Avenue South, 320th Street, Signal and Pedestrian Improvements, bid award.
All right, good evening. I'm Christine Mullen, the engineering manager for the city, here for the bid award of the 21st and 320th PED signal project. Question is, should the council award the project to the lowest responsive responsible bidder? We opened bids in late December. We had 7 bidders for the project, and the lowest responsive responsible bidder is Rain City Services, and their total bid is $1,048,067.82. Here's a breakdown of the costs for the project. Design, right-of-way, have the construction contract there with 10% contingency, and then some construction management costs. We're just 1.76 million plus a little change. And then this project, we have funding from Sound Transit, as well as a variety of city sources here with REITs, traffic impact fees, lift funds, and then an additional 50,000 in 306 funds that we're requesting to be transferred in order to have the project be fully funded. So the options for consideration are to award the project to Rain City Services, who's the lowest responsible bidder, and authorize the transfer of 50,000 from our capital improvement 306 fund and authorize the mayor to execute the contract. And option 2 would be to reject all bids and direct staff to rebid the project. The mayor recommends forwarding option 1 to the consent agenda.
Council President Kulturnmer?
Thank you. Can you just describe for the people that are watching which is 21st Avenue South? It's east and west going left turning movements, but
It is right here. It is in front of the mall. It's at the intersection that has Mod Pizza right there at 320th. And so this is a signal being put in to accommodate pedestrians crossing across 320th.
Councilmember Walsh?
And it's kind of the funky one where they cross here and then go down the middle, then cross.
It is
Yeah.
a little offset, yeah, so they will cross and then walk a little bit and then finish their
All right.
crossing movement.
I don't understand the concept of it, but I trust you guys,
Right.
so.
Could you go back to the slide that showed the breakdown of the price, the cost? So the top one has total projections to the net, 1,762,874. And then down below you have 1,770,000. I mean, it's an $8,000 difference. I mean, is that just a typo or is that just?
It's just, we
Okay.
just said, let's just do an even transfer of 50,000 to cover the difference. I mean, technically, we could have said transfer
So
42,000.
sometime in our budget season, we should see the $7,136 come back?
hopefully you'll see the contingency come
Yeah,
back.
yeah, hopefully the contingency also.
I mean, usually those are the same number, and that's why it kind of caught me different.
Yeah, so usually when we do a transfer in where we are under, or sorry, we're over the allocated budget, we try and pick a round number to transfer, that way we're not transferring pennies
Okay.
like this. And then, yes, to your point, hopefully we'll be transferring money back when we're done.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So is the 306 fund, is that the general fund?
No, that is restricted funding.
Uh-huh.
That is the capital fund for
Oh, okay.
infrastructure.
Okay, all right.
Okay, Councilmember Honda?
Thank you. Where did the traffic impact fees come for this project? Who paid them?
I don't know the answer to that one, Rick.
Probably a lot of people.
Yeah, the impact fees are pooled citywide, and then we pull out whatever is needed from that pool to complete funding for projects like this.
So how,
We don't have a way of identifying
oh, okay.
who contributed to it.
So how much funding is left for traffic impact fees if you take this out?
I don't have that number for you, but we can get it.
Okay. And I guess that's all for now. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Lydia, I can't see, do you have any questions?
No, I don't. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
there you are, you're on the screen now, okay. Do we have a motion?
Yeah. I move to forward option 1 to the January 16, 2024 consent agenda for approval.
I'll second it, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Go Beavers, right?
That's right.
Okay. Item E is the ordinance declaring a fire damage structured public nuisance.
Good evening, council members. This is actually a very brief ordinance. There are only 7 words and 1 comma that are being changed as part of this ordinance, or proposed to be changed. So I believe I've actually presented a nuisance ordinance, chronic nuisance ordinance in front of you guys a year or 2 ago. But just a brief introduction for those of you who might not be familiar with the term nuisances. So our code identifies many what are called general nuisances as well as specific nuisances. Some nuisances range from anything from debris, junk on a private piece of property to overgrown vegetation over the right-of-way to a number of things that you could think of, unpermitted structures, a whole bunch of stuff. And they fall into 2 buckets. The general nuisances are kind of general, vague legal descriptions of nuisances, like anything that's, quote, unreasonably offensive to the senses. So they're kind of flowery, very general legal categories. Those are what the general nuisances are. Specific nuisances are the ones that I gave examples of previously. They're things like vegetation over a sidewalk. They're more specific. So code enforcement enforces the city's nuisance code through a number of enforcement mechanisms, voluntary compliance, tickets, notices of violation. And specific to this ordinance, there's been several commercial and residential structures recently that have been damaged as a result of fire. The 2 that I've put on the slide here are the O'Reilly Auto Parts and the Jack in the Box locations. Some of those structures are really significantly damaged, like the Jack in the Box was by fire, to the point where they're no longer occupiable. Those ones get posted by the building department as do not occupy. Nobody's allowed to occupy them. They're violations of the building code, and they have to be remedied before anybody can occupy them again. On the other hand, there are some that have cosmetic damage that's caused by the fire, but they don't have any structural damage, or they have very little structural damage, so you can still occupy and use the building, like in the case of the O'Reilly Auto Parts. It's just a question of it being singed on the outside and there being burn marks and general aesthetic ugliness. So in many cases, these fire damage structures probably qualify as general public nuisances under the Federal Way Revised Code, but we don't have any specific call out in our specific public nuisance section that applies to fire damaged structures. So that's what these 7 words in the comma are meant to do. They're meant to call out unsightly or deteriorated structures that are unsightly or deteriorated as a result of fire damage as a specific public nuisance. What this will help to do is it will help code enforcement to require remediation of fire damaged buildings and require remediation that's specifically targeted at the aesthetic or the visual impact of the fire damage. For instance, requiring screening of the fire damaged structure from adjacent properties or the right-of-way, and or another example would be temporary window coverings that aren't as ugly as just plywood nailed over a fire burnt out window. So essentially, this is a pretty limited scope of code amendment. It's meant to just make it easier for code enforcement to specifically regulate, in particular, the aesthetic impacts from fire damaged structures. And with that, we have the options to forward the proposed ordinance to first reading or do not forward it and provide direction to staff. I'm available for any questions you might have.
I think I'm going to jump in first before I let everybody else. Those 2 instances you talk about were caused by criminal activity, not by the owners of the building or the businesses. And it appears to me we're penalizing the victim and not penalizing the perpetrator of the offense. And I understand they don't maybe look good, but a lot of those things have to do with insurance and having to have to work with the business people that had it. And I understand the ordinance, but I don't think I can support this. This is putting too much on the business owner and the guy trying to make a living. And so anyway, this is my comment.
Yeah, and I definitely appreciate that perspective. I'd give you another example of a situation where it's not necessarily the property owner's fault, but we already enforce our nuisance code against them, and that would be unpermitted encampments on private property. Frequently, a person will own a piece of property. They might use their best efforts with a fence or with signs or whatever it might be to prevent people from trespassing onto that property, but there's still a big homeless encampment on that property that creates junk, debris, unsafe stuff. In those situations, we always try to work to get voluntary compliance from those property owners, because usually they don't want their property, filled with homeless encampments either. But that's another situation that we frequently do place the onus on the property owner to clean up that property, even though they didn't really cause it in the first place. So just an example in a slightly different context.
And maybe we need to rethink how we do that.
Fair enough.
Councilmember McDowell, you have a comment?
I agree 100% with what you just said on both of the issues you brought up today. I think it's a crock, but that's just me. My question is if this gets changed, what is the enforcement like? What is the penalty? What's the time frame? I mean, O'Reilly's building was a lot longer. I mean, the Jack in the Box, I believe that was a chase, a pursuit. They went astray and a vehicle crashed into it. So what is the time frame if this was to pass? What is the time frame? And also, what is the penalty, the punitive damages they have to pay?
Sure. And so this goes back to, code enforcement has a number of different ways that they can enforce the nuisance code. And code enforcement always starts with voluntary compliance. In other words, they call the property owner, they talk through with them, they say, here's what's required, here's what we suggest you do. That process usually they give them weeks or more in the case of a fire damaged structure where your insurance company is dragging their feet or you're not able to get funding for the repairs. They take that into account when they're enforcing these nuisance laws. Once you get past voluntary compliance, there's also infraction tickets. They're very similar to a speeding ticket that you get. It's a municipal court violation that's handled downstairs. Those tickets are, I think these numbers are right, 200 for the first offense, 400 for the second offense, and 600 for the third offense of the same type. Those tickets can be mitigated. People will again, if you've ever gotten a speeding ticket, you can request a mitigation hearing. You can go in front of the judge. You can say, here are all the reasons why that should be less. And frequently, judges will considerably mitigate the ticket amount. So that's the kind of the second method of enforcing these nuisance codes. There's another one, and this is the big one in air quotes, which is to issue a notice of violation. That's a formal adjudication that a violation has occurred, it's appealable to the city's hearing examiner. Frequently, notices of violation are indeed appealed to the hearing examiner. I've litigated at least 3 or 4 of those since I've been here. In that case, and we usually only use notices of violation for serious situations, but if they don't appeal, or if they don't comply with the notice of violation, or if they appeal and they lose and then don't comply with the hearing examiner's order, that one can be a substantial penalty, because it's, and again, I'm working off my memory here, but I believe it's $300 for the first day of violation, $400 for the second day of violation, and $500 for each subsequent day that the violation continues to exist. So that's a situation where you could have a substantial monetary penalty rack up if somebody doesn't comply with one of those notices of violation for, say, 2 months, right? That's quite a bit, because you're talking up to $500 per day in that situation. By the way, just one more note on that. If you don't comply with the notice of violation, the city can actually come in and remediate the problem itself, and then charge the property owner, should council approve an assessment lien on that property. That's another reason why we use notices of violation for serious things, where if the property owner doesn't comply with the notice of violation, it enables the city to actually just fix the problem itself and then come back for the money potentially later.
Okay, and then what's the timeframe for, like, let's use the O'Reillys as for an example. How long was it before they actually started putting repairs against that? And did you guys reach out to them, or like, what's the timeframe for that particular example?
I don't have personal knowledge of either the O'Reilly or Jack in the Box situations. What I can tell you is that generally, once a code enforcement officer knows that a violation exists, they'll reach out to the property owner. They'll try to meet with the property owner, talk to them either on the phone or in person. And that period of attempting to achieve voluntary compliance, it's usually like a couple weeks to get in communication. And then depending on how much needs to be done, that period of voluntary compliance can be quite long. For instance, a recent notice of violation that was issued, we gave them 90 days to solve the problem, with no penalty, just, 90 days. This was a different situation. This was a unpermitted clear and grade on a residential property, but they were given 90-plus days to comply of their own accord. And then if it's a simple thing like you have 5 tires, 5 tires and an old fridge on your property, we're probably not going to give them 90 days of voluntary compliance in that situation to clean up the fridge and the 6 tires, right? That's going to be you have a week to do it,
Okay.
So it kind of just depends on the nature and the severity of the violation, how long that voluntary compliance period is. Afterwards, tickets take like a month or 2 at least to go through, for there to be a hearing and all that stuff. Notice of violation, we're talking weeks and potentially months before it actually gets finalized to a point where they need to do something.
Okay, and then is this added piece because of like the O'Reillys, is that like a prime example of it?
It is, because, we probably could require, we believe that our current code, even unmodified, would allow us to require screening and other aesthetic stuff to reduce the impacts of the fire damaged property, but this will just make it even more clear that we can do that.
Okay, and then my only thing is, if it does pass through here, is I'd want the case study of that one, how long, who talked to him, and kind of get an understanding of that. Thank you.
Councilmember Honda?
Thank you. So does this impact, let's say a residential structure burns down and it takes 2-3 years before it's built up again, and all the neighbors around there have to live with this house, it's ongoing in the city right now. And I've had neighbors complain to me, and there were the neighborhood I'm thinking of is in Marina Hills. 2 homes were burned on July 4th. And one is occupied again, and the one that suffered the most damage has had some work done, but not a whole lot, and the neighbors are pretty unhappy, as I would be. It's over 2 years now that they have to look at this. Not even the yard's being kept up, it's like garbage is thrown there. So would this impact that at all?
Yes, it would. This applies both to residential as well as commercial structures. The situation you described, it sounds like one of those is non-occupiable still.
Right.
But this code would still apply to either of those 2 situations. How it might benefit the adjacent residences, maybe It would allow for screening, other stuff that makes those properties not look quite as much of a eyesore in the meantime, while they are able to, work through the insurance process or whatever other process it might be to rebuild the structures. So
Well,
yes,
they-
it would be applicable to
They've
that.
started rebuilding, but then they stopped. So it's just kind of very, still unslight, it's just very unfortunate for those houses that are around it and have to look at it every day.
This is definitely code that we could use to address that. And I don't know if there's been current actions to address those houses specifically, but this is definitely code that we could apply to that situation.
So how long would we let a residential structure that's burned and unoccupied go before the city stepped in and said, you need to step it up?
So for one that's unoccupiable, it gets tagged as do not occupy and is essentially you can't occupy it pretty much immediately by the fire department and or the building department here. I believe it's usually the fire department. The answer to the second half of your question of how long we'd give them before we started pursuing other code enforcement actions, in other words, to get them to remediate the look of the building and stuff like that, that's a bit up to the discretion of the code enforcement officer, right? I think Councilmember McDaniel's and Councilmember Dovey's comments hinted at this. It's kind of a case-by-case basis because it depends on the homeowner's situation, right? If the homeowner doesn't have any money, if they're having difficulty with their insurance company, if they're, we could probably give them more time in that instance. On the other hand, if they're just completely non-responsive and they're not talking to code enforcement and they're not addressing the problem at all, we have no proof that they're doing their due diligence with their insurance company to go through the hoops to get it rebuilt, then we would give them less time in that situation. So it's kind of a case-by-case basis. There are no definite, like, if you've had a violation for 17 days, we immediately issue a notice of violation. There are no hard and fast rules when it comes to when we issue those things.
Okay, thank you.
Council President Kochmar?
So I do know of a house that burned, it does have the plywood on the windows, in a residential area, but not in an HOA. It's been this way for 2 years. And I simply assumed that it had gone back to the bank or something because nothing has been done, but it is an eyesore. So is that something that we would call the code compliance and say what's going on here?
Assuming this passes, yes. Again, that's another great example of what this is supposed to at least help with. For instance, I think this could be used to require something more than plywood to cover the burnt-out windows, something that's at least a little bit better looking for the neighbors. Again, require potentially screening fences or something that lessens the degree of the eyesore to surrounding properties.
So, your heart goes out to the person whose home was burned, and at the same time, I just for example, so it's an attractive nuisance in insurance language. If you have an attractive nuisance, it could attract kids who could get hurt, and there's a liability issue. So I did have a friend, this is a little off the topic, but it's kind of related, who, it's a shame, the wife passed away, and they lived in a very nice area, very nice house, and for some reason, the gentleman started hoarding farm equipment in his yard. And when the neighbors were complaining, because they will call us when they complain, he called it yard art. And he thought I would agree with him because we were friends. And I said, no, it's not yard art, it's junk, and you have to move it. Well, then he got mad and he moved to Montana. So I have no idea.
One way of solving problems.
Right?
Avoidance.
He's going to mine for gold. So, I don't know. At any rate, I think that code compliance got rid of the attractive nuisance is what it was. You're going to have kids getting hurt. But I've been wondering about that one house, so thank you for doing this.
Councilmember Walsh?
Yeah, just another what-if scenario. Suppose there was this would probably be residential, where there was something, fire or something with somebody camping on their stuff in some sort of encampment, whatever, and the property owner did not have the means to take care of it, and that insurance was not applicable, there wasn't insurance, or it wasn't applicable, the property owner had no financial means to take care of it, would there be means for the city to go in, clean it up, lien the property, but not give them an additional fine for not having done it themselves to begin with, if they didn't have the means to do it to start with?
Yes, so the monetary penalty accrues per code, but that does not prevent the city from waiving the monetary penalty that accrues for noncompliance. Indeed, when we enter into voluntary compliance agreements to resolve outstanding violations, we'll frequently agree to waive part of the monetary penalty for these things. As to whether the city has the funding to do it in the first place, that's kind of on a case-by-case basis. We're not in the business of rebuilding residential houses, but we are frequently in the business of paying $10,000 to a junk removal company to remove somebody's, if they have an accumulation of junk and debris on their property. That's something we do
Right.
relatively frequently. I'm sure you guys have seen the liens come through to council after those.
Okay. Right, thank you.
I got a couple questions. I think, first of all, we shouldn't be referring to O'Reilly Auto Parts and Jack in the Box. Those are examples, but I would think O'Reilly is actually the landlord, because I doubt they own the building. And Jack in the Box, it's an unfortunate thing. Both of those were unfortunate, where the victims are the ones we're talking about. But if we take this a step further, the Target building that we just tore down would have been in the same situation. And that went on for years at this council, where we didn't take it down. And we didn't do anything with it because it was a derelict building that was empty, that the homeless people had moved into, that had stripped everything out. And all of a sudden, I understand the hazard that we have to mitigate to. And I know in the years that passed when I was on here, we've actually scraped a burned down house and put a lien on property. So I don't have a problem with that. But this just doesn't feel right to me. It's penalizing potentially, and all those have to be insurance. So nobody's gonna keep their business going and it's burned out just to do it. And the people at Jack in the Box had nothing to do with it. They're probably wishing they still had their business, because they've lost all their cash flow and they've lost all their employees, and they're waiting on the insurance thing. And I think we have examples where we go both ways on this. If we had this law in place, we would have had to tore down. I think we as a city would have had to go on into Target many years ago and clean that.
Yeah, let me comment on that specific thing. This makes it so that we can do those things. It doesn't make it so that we have to. I would say actually under our existing nuisance code, so forget this ordinance for a second, just apply our existing nuisance code. I think we could have required Target or something to happen with the Target property under existing nuisance code. There's general and specific nuisances that absolutely would have applied. I think Council President mentioned attractive nuisance.
I remember the land art.
Things that are.
I was on the council then.
Things that are attractive nuisances are one of the things that are called out as nuisances in code. I'm pretty sure an old derelict building that people are going into qualifies as that. So the point being, we could have done that with the Target building, but we chose not to for policy and enforcement reasons.
But we're now we're putting this into place, which we have to have safety issues on burned out houses and all that. I get that. But we're choosing to strengthen our code because of two instances that happened where we already have the code we don't need this code, as I see it.
I generally agree with the statement that we don't need it, because I think legally we can act under our current code to do what we would be acting to do under the new code. This really makes the language a lot clearer so that such an action wouldn't be as subject to legal challenge, is one of the main reasons for this.
Yeah.
But it's a tough policy call. I mean, to your point earlier, this is a balancing of the property owner and their interests with the rights of the public in general. That's how all public nuisances are, unfortunately. It's a penalizing one person for the good of the public type general idea.
Yeah.
Up to you guys whether or not to do it.
So,
I understand.
Yeah.
my thoughts that with this discussion right here, I think rather than forwarding it to the, this would be for the first reading, it's not the consent anyway. I'd say forward to the first reading, we can discuss it with the full council then.
Well, I would, from my standpoint, I would not even want to send it to council.
Okay?
Because if we send it to first reading, I still think we have to bake this a little bit more. And, I mean, I get it, and I know the one house that Councilmember Honda talked about, the people bought it, they fixed it up and sold it for like almost $900,000. I don't know about the other one, because in my neighborhood that's burned down, I'm not aware of another one, but, I mean, over the years, we've gone and tore houses down and put a lien on it, and I'm okay with that. Now we're getting to this commercial piece of it, and I don't know. I have a hard time passing this through.
I have a question. Does this help our code enforcement officers? Because their job is pretty tough. Does this make it easier for them?
Yes, I do think that's again, part of the purpose here is to make it easier and more defensible for code enforcement officers to deal with fire damaged structures specifically.
I mean, I think in the city world, being a code enforcement officer is one of the more difficult jobs you can have. And if we can do something that makes it easier for them, then I think we need to really look at it.
So, and on that, I have one more follow-up question. Have we called these two people and asked them what's going on? I mean, has anybody put a call to the owner of Jack in the Box that's got their building burned down when a car ran into it and asked them what's happening?
I'm pretty sure the answer is yes. I don't have personal knowledge of it though, since that's the code enforcement officers. I can definitely get that answer for you if you'd
I
like
mean,
to
and
know.
before, I'd like to know what that discussion went like before I vote on something like this. And also Riley, I think they're actually fixing it right now. So, again,
That's an example of voluntary compliance.
yeah, I mean,
Yes.
hey, most people,
compliance is slow.
it's slow because insurance companies or whatever, but
Semi-voluntary compliance.
phone call we might, yeah. Can we move this to our next land use meeting and maybe you can ask those questions?
Absolutely. I'll have the code enforcement officers that are on the Jack in the Box and O'Reilly things be here so they can answer questions for you guys too.
So,
Councilmember McDaniel?
I got a quick one on top of that, if you're gonna go back and talk to them. I know there's a couple of houses in the Federal area who are constantly adding extra vehicles and stuff, and they get calls literally once a year, if not twice a year, and they clean it up and they do it again, clean it up, do it again. So I'm curious, I'm more concerned about those particular houses than I am this one. So if you could add that to their questions on those kind of houses too, I'd like to hear more information on that.
Sure, and I'd be happy to discuss that with you offline too. I've been involved in a lot of those, so I have
I'm
some.
sure we're thinking the same houses too.
There are quite a few.
Yeah, yeah. All right, thank you.
Same parking lots? Yes, Councilmember Coach.
so with regard to Jack in the Box, so it's a franchise, I understand that, and the franchise owner is probably in a very hard spot right now. So I'm wondering if, for example, the franchise owner walked away from it, and Jack in the Box is a huge corporation, could it sit there forever unless we do something?
Potentially.
Well, see, we don't really want that blight in the middle of our city.
That's true. As I said earlier, though, we're not really in the business of reconstructing fire damaged structures either. Like that, the city's not about to go in and reconstruct a commercial building. But to your point, at least with this, we could clearly screen it and do a bunch of other stuff that would at least make that visual blight, even if it goes on for a long period of time, at least a little bit better for passersby and for people driving by.
But if we discuss this later, and we could always use the code that we have now that gives us the ability to put a lien on a piece of property and go and scrape it, and then put the lien on the property.
Correct.
Yeah,
That's
and
something we can currently do.
We could do that
Absolutely.
today.
Yep, absolutely.
And-
The ones that are difficult are the ones that aren't so damaged that they're non-occupiable. It's
Right.
the ones that are, it's the static damage as opposed to
Right.
the thing's burnt down and you can't So,
But when we're talking about Jack in the Box as a location, if their insurance company and they can't come to some conclusion, we today with our law could go in there.
yep,
So you could come back to us at the council and say, hey, we got a problem here. We think this is rat infested. It's got problem. It's been burned out. We want to scrape it.
yep.
You have the tools to do that today.
Definitely with the Jack in the Box situation.
Yeah, Jack in the
yes.
Box, you could do that today if they said, hey, we're not going to do this for a long period of time. So, I mean, this is just adding more to the tools you already have, and you already have the tools.
Yep, I agree with that characterization.
Yeah,
Yep.
so personally, I don't really want to pass this out of committee. I'd like to get some more information. I don't know if,
I'm fine with that.
okay. Thank you. We will not vote on it.
Do you need to take an action that would say that you'll bring it back at the next
Yeah,
land use meeting?
I'd like to bring it back and have a little bit more information if we could.
Okay, do you want to,
Well,
Councilmember Walsh, you want to make a motion?
well, do we have
Or-
to, I don't know if we have to have a motion to bring it
Your
back.
motion can just be to table the item till the next meeting.
Okay,
Yeah, move to table it.
second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much, though.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to quarterly update, progress of the comprehensive plan periodic update. Now, did you go to UW?
I did not.
Okay,
My
you're-
dad did.
Okay, well, you're not so excited about getting home for the game yet, right?
No, I'm not really a football fan.
I'm just,
But I'll keep it short, don't worry.
no, I don't have to keep it short. You always have good information, so thank you.
Well, it is a relatively short presentation
We
this
spent
time.
a whole year on this. Now we're starting it next year.
Longer than that. All right, well, good evening, committee. I'm Janie Scatson, senior planner, and this is another one of our quarterly updates. It's going to be relatively short. We've got 3 items here we're going to discuss. Go over what we've talked about so far. So in less detail, but I just want it to be really fresh in your minds of the topics we've covered since beginning this process. So that nothing seems like a shock. I have the dates and the meetings that we've presented on certain materials and a list of items that remain to be presented. Go over the adoption schedule and then start our next round of promoting our final comp plan update open house, which will be on Leap Day. So here is a table on your screen of the meetings we've had so far with LUTC discussing the quarterly update, or doing our quarterly updates on the comprehensive plan periodic update. In the beginning, we talked a lot about the foundational kind of pieces to set for how we were going to update the comp plan. So setting our vision statement, how we're doing public participation, giving updates on that, how we're going to address DEIA. And then we started diving into specific chapters. There's been briefings on our centers and our South Station sub-area plan, the Arts, Culture, and Historic Preservation chapter, which is a new chapter to the comp plan, not previously existed, or doesn't exist now, but is proposed to be included. Further giving periodic updates on our community outreach efforts, climate change and resiliency, another new chapter. And then, of course, our mandated chapters, like transportation, parks and rec, I have that in there twice, housing, and there's a couple that we have yet to discuss. So, and I think the next LUTC meeting, private utilities and capital facilities will be covered. Land use, economic development, natural environment, and shoreline all remain. Some of these have a much heavier lift than others. So for example, last meeting I presented on housing, and that was very little about actual Federal Ways housing inventory, housing need, land capacity analysis, more on just how the rules have changed. Whereas some of these chapters have maybe no rules have changed and we're just updating data. So those might be really short and quick updates. But stay tuned. These are the items we'll be sure to bring to you before the end. Oh. And you've seen this before, but this is our adoption schedule. We'll keep coming, maybe even more frequent before the end of the year than our quarterly updates to discuss those remaining topics. And, depending on how close we get to the schedule, we're trying to stay on the schedule. There's no dates here, but our goal is to take the comp plan for action to full council in November. We have wiggle room for December, but we'll be back at LUTC at least by October, by the end. This is our.
Can I ask you one question?
Yeah.
In the past, we've had 2 LUTC meetings in a month. This is a long time ago, and now we have 1. Are we going to need additional meetings throughout the year to meet your timeline?
I don't know, not for the comp plan update. I don't anticipate that.
Okay,
No.
thank you.
This is a table here of our existing and proposed new chapters and whether they've been taken through, the level below us, or below the committee here at Planning Commission. So these are the chapters that the Planning Commission has been briefed on, and those that are in progress and not started. And I keep hitting the wrong arrow. And then here we go. Let's get ready for our Leap Day open house. We'll be hosting it this time at the City Hall here, unlike the PAC and the Community Center where we hosted the other 2. And it'll be from 3 to 7. We've already reserved a number of the rooms, so it'll truly function like an open house where members of the community will be welcomed into the Development Center where staff will be and they can walk on the map and look around, and also into council chambers, Hylobos room, and beyond. But this was our kind of our last hurrah. There's still obviously time for community to provide input, and nothing is fully baked until the entire comp plan is adopted. But we're hoping that this final open house will be more of like, look at what we've done, here's where we landed, and here let's talk about implementation. This is how we bring these goals and policies to life. Any questions?
Lydia, do you have any questions?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I see no questions.
Thank you,
Great.
Janie.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Janie. Okay, you going to give us a ski report?
So Kent is out visiting his family this week, so you get me.
No?
So some quick updates on Sound Transit. There's not a lot to report here. So over the holidays from Thanksgiving through New Year's Day, we have a moratorium on road closures in the downtown core. So that, now that we're after New Year's Day, is lifted, so you're starting to see work come back on the right-of-way. Throughout that duration of that time, they did work on site. There was a lot of work done up on the bridge deck as well as within the future site itself proper. So north of 317th, this is very similar to the last slide you've seen over the last couple months. They're continuing to work on mainly the track and then everything adjacent to the track, so the landscaping and noise rolls. That will continue through the early summer, and there's not really going to be much change on this. They're progressing. They're making progress, but it's just a lot of work. Within the city center, as I mentioned, they're kind of restarting some of that work. So they're going to shift back to one-way traffic on 23rd Avenue South. That's expected to start in the next couple of weeks, and the goal of that is to finish up the concrete roadway throughout that. They have started construction of the bus loop, which is currently inside the fences and you can't see, but that is ongoing. And then there's a lot of utility work going on also within the fences. The end-of-line facility, so that is the facility on the south side of 320th, the masonry building you see there. They've switched to working on the interior, so they need to have that operational when the bus loop comes online. So they're chugging away on that as well. On the operations and maintenance facility, we are working with them on their preliminary designs that they are going to try to put into their final EIS. They are expecting to publish that by mid-2024. Beyond that, it's the same as what council's seen. We're kind of at the level of just going through the technical. Here's city code, here's what they're doing and where are the deviations that need to be documented into the final EIS. The next major step you will see for the OMF facility is twofold. One, we're starting some preliminary conversations with them about a development agreement that is part of the partnering agreement, sets the framework and the stage for that was executed a couple of years ago. But it is expected that there will be a development agreement, as there was with the Federal Way Link extension, that outlines responsibilities, them paying for inspections and staff and everything else as part of development of the OMF. So that'll be the next large milestone that comes before council. And then also that publication of the final EIS. So that, similar to what we just recently did for the Tacoma Dome Link extension, where we came to council, solicited input, put together a technical response, that same process will happen with the OMF mid-2024. Tacoma Dome Link extension, they are still trying to push towards a draft, so not the final one as the OMF, but a draft environmental impact statement in the middle of 2024. They are kind of in their, their own offices putting together the environmental. We haven't had a lot of work with them on this project right now. We've been focused on the OMF and the Federal Way Link extension. So they are working through some of the environmental hiccups that they encountered and proceeding to pull documents together to be able to come back to city staff. That hasn't really occurred as of yet. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Honda?
Thank you. Have the homeowners in Belmore Park been informed if their property is needing to be used by Sound Transit?
So they have been previously. There's been no updated notifications as of yet. They did have an open house with Belmore a couple weeks ago that my understanding was well attended. They hosted it at Belmore in the clubhouse, and it was open to just the people whose properties were going to be taken, and the HOA and a couple other very select people. They did receive preliminary approval from Federal Transit Authority to start the process of acquiring property. The next step is that actually needs to go back to the Sound Transit Board for final approval. After that happens, that'll be the point that they can actually start talking to the property owners.
So do you know how many property owners are impacted? We've never really been told a number.
That makes two of us. We've seen, the alignment map, but no, I can't say I've ever seen an exact number of properties either.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no more questions, well, guess we got all the information until the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any other thing anybody'd like to bring up? Seeing none, we will adjourn our meeting.